Welcome to the Manders Mindset Podcast. Here you'll find both monologue and interviews of entrepreneurs, coaches, healers, and a variety of other people, where your host Amanda Russo will discuss her own mindset and perspective and her guest mindset and perspective on the world around us. Manders and her guests will help explain to you how shifting your mindset will shift your life.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Mando's Mindset. I'm here today with Haley Harkin. Now, Haley and I met a little over a year ago when I went to New Hampshire for an Ayahuasca ceremony, and she was one of the medicine handlers there. And I learned a lot from her within one weekend and have continued learning from her. She's really talented. She's a musician as well. And I've just been blessed by her presence and have learned so much from her. And I knew she would be a great guest to have on the show. And I'm here with Haley.
Oh, thanks.
Of course. So I'm curious if you can touch upon a little bit about what ayahuasca is for those who haven't heard of it. I had an episode earlier with Chris who discussed a little bit about it being a plant medicine, but he didn't delve in too deep.
Yeah, there are many different brews, kind of just depending on the tradition that you come from. The most traditional is there's actually like a Santo Daime hymn, and it basically says there's only 4 ingredients, and it's water, love, vine, and fire. So it's Banisterios capi, which is the vine that is most portrayed as, like, if you Google ayahuasca, you'll see like the twisting vine. I actually have one on my altar back there. And then chacruna leaves. So typically it's just those 2 plants with water. But some other traditions use different, basically like chacruna replacements. So chacruna like allows you to absorb the DMT into your brain. And so there are many plants that do that. Mimosa is another one, but the most typical and what we work with is only the Banisterios capi and the chacruna plants.
Okay.
It's just 2 things in water.
Okay. And so what is the chacruna? Can you explain that?
It's like a little bushy plant, green leaves, and so they harvest just the leaves. And the vine is just the vine, and then using the leaves from the chacruna plant.
Okay. And what do they do with these 3 things to make the brew? Like, how does it become?
Yeah, it's normally like a 3-day process. It's kind of a big thing. Again, different traditions call it different things. Brazilian would be a fachio, is what it's called. And batazão is where you like break down the vine, very old school. They literally have like brown or like wooden hammers. So they're like curved cylinder with handles, and they beat the vine until it becomes like hair. And so you have to process the vine to that fine of material. And the chacruna is harvested like that day, washed and dried. And then you basically, add there's a ratio of vine to leaf, depending how strong and stuff like that. And then, water. And so there's big pots on open flames or like on actual wood fire, depending on the setup. And then that goes on for about 3 days. And so it goes constant stirring, straining, adding more water. And you're basically just reducing until, it becomes a darker pigment.
Okay. Wow. That's cool.
Yeah.
Now, how did you first discover ayahuasca?
I had been hearing about it because I went to cosmetology school right after I graduated high school. And one of my teachers in there, I'd graduated already, but we were friends on Facebook. And she documented her journey to Peru pretty publicly. And that was the first time. I think I had maybe heard of it before. I don't remember. That might have been my first time hearing about it. And then I think about 1.5 years, 2 years went on. Her and I were like in conversation. My mom and I were talking about it. And then my mom's yoga teacher invited her to what then became my teacher's ceremony. So my mom went that year in April, And then I went in November, and we sat different weekends when he came back. And yeah.
Wow, that's cool. So have you sat doing ayahuasca with your mom?
Yeah, many times.
I love
Yeah, she's
that.
also a musician, and so we share that. And yeah, she's at most ceremonies we do, and she does all our registration and stuff. So
Oh, I love that. That is so special.
yeah,
Wow, that's so sweet.
yeah,
Okay. So about how long ago was that you discovered
that was in
ayahuasca?
2016.
Okay.
Yeah,
And so how long have you been handling the medicine?
a few years. So in our circles, we have someone called a guardian, and so those are people who drink less and help support the space. So I did that for many years. I became quickly involved because my second ceremony I was asked to play. And so then after that, I played at every ceremony, and then I became an assistant and a guardian. And then I was going to Brazil multiple times a year and being a guardian there. And I studied under my teacher's wife for music. So I would go for like a month at a time to Brazil, and we would be doing ceremony and doing music stuff. Um, yeah, so I was a part of it for a while already, but on our own about 3 years.
Wow, that's so cool. I
Yeah.
love that how you like worked your way up kind of like through the system. Like you did the guardian, the assistant. Wow.
Yeah, and if my teacher dying is what expedited the process. If he was still alive, it probably would have been slower to start facilitating because there wasn't a need. Um,
Mhm.
like I wanted to keep learning for a long time, and I'm still learning all the time from the medicine. I don't have like someone that I call my teacher like him in real life, at this moment. But I learn, from myself, from the medicine, from my partner, and people around me that influence me. But yeah, if he was still alive, that would have kept going for probably a lot,
Mhm.
longer until, yeah, I don't know. It would be different,
Yeah, no, definitely. So you mentioned you learned a lot. What would you say is maybe one of the biggest things you've learned from ayahuasca?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would say it's hard to, like, a lot of it is hard to put into words. It's more, I call it moments of remembering. And that's something you can't like intellectualize necessarily. It's more a feeling. It's a deep, deep knowing. Like there are moments where you know everything that is ever, but I could never describe what that even means. But there's a 1 second, 2 second moment where you literally just know everything about the universe, but it's not in your head. It's yeah, in your heart. Um, so I would say, yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it for me, feeling what unconditional love is, because most of the population has not ever felt that because we as humans have conditions. Um, and the medicine is unconditional love. There are no conditions. So it's God, And so that in itself is very transformative and healing to feel what that is like. And then basically you're being taught how to be that.
No, that makes sense. Honestly, I agree. I don't have much experience with ayahuasca, but even the one weekend I did sit with it, I couldn't really describe my experience to people, what I learned, what I saw, what I took away. Like I knew it, but to explain it was like explaining a kaleidoscope to a blind person. Like
Yeah.
almost impossible.
For me, it's for a reason. Like we always tell people, like when you share your experience and you regurgitate the same thing over and over again, it just becomes a story. And that's not the point because it's a visceral experience and words are very limiting. And it's like you don't need to explain, And most people aren't even going to be able to meet you where you're at to try and explain to them. So it's like being particular on who you share with because then it can diminish your experience because they're not understanding.
Yep. I remember, I don't know if it was just you and Rodney, but I remember hearing you guys say that at the retreat. I
Mm.
remember it.
Yeah.
Don't share this too much. You'll know who to share it with because it's gonna change it from reality to a story.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, okay. Um, so little transition of a question, but I'm curious. A lot of people have had what they call an aha moment or a moment where they did something different, they had a different life experience and just realized something about themselves, about the world around them. Would you say you've had an aha moment?
Yeah, it was when I found the medicine.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
felt like
How did
my whole life kind of made sense, like for the first
Mm,
time. And again, not necessarily intellectually, but just like, I found it, whatever that even means. It was just like, I've done this before, you know?
mm. Was there a way that you knew, or was it just intuitively?
Yeah, just intuitively, like, I mean, after the first one, I was like, I'm signing up for every single one. I'm gonna go to Brazil 3 times a year. It was just like, this is it. It's this.
Okay. Love that. Love that. Okay. So I'm curious, have you delved into any other plant medicines besides ayahuasca?
Yeah, ayahuasca was actually my first psychedelic, believe it or not. And I tried, I think, like mushrooms were never around growing up or anything. They just weren't. Like, I think I knew of them, but nobody I knew like had done them or anything. Um, so it wasn't after ayahuasca that I worked with psilocybin, and we actually started leading psilocybin ceremonies first before we did ayahuasca ceremonies, to start to like lay the foundation of the community. And it was a one night thing, so it's like we spend the night. It's a lot less commitment, a lot less financial investment, all that. So that's what we started doing first. So yeah, and I've been growing psilocybin for quite a few years, and so I work with them. What else? I'm like, what else is psychedelic? Acid I have done a few times, and yeah, but everything that I've used, because all I know is ceremonial container, has been in that way. So it's like, because my first psychedelic experience was in that, that's all I know. So, whenever I take even acid, like it was a ceremonial setting. It was Rodney and I and two of our closest friends who have been drinking medicine for years, and there was no talking, like, there was only music. That was it. And psilocybin. And for me, psilocybin, I can get to the same place as ayahuasca now. I still prefer ayahuasca though, and I personally don't have a desire to do anything else necessarily. I would be content with just doing ayahuasca.
Hmm.
I don't
Okay.
like to do everything that's out there. There are a lot of people that get caught in the trap of being like psychonauts and stuff. And I actually think that's just running from yourself, or you like getting high, because it feels good, right? But it's like, are we avoiding stuff? Are we just looking to like get off in some sense? And for me, I only work with what I feel called to work with. So it's like, yeah, I have some friends do Wachuma stuff. I'm like, yeah, maybe if it feels like a yes, I'll do it. But I'm not going to just do it because it's a medicine. I want to feel called to do it.
Wow. No, I get that makes a lot of sense. I agree with all of that. So I'm curious, how did you make the switch from psilocybin ceremonies to ayahuasca ceremonies?
It was pretty natural. I had like created a mailing list basically just for psilocybin, and then I had one for ayahuasca because there's like, ayahuasca is much more intense. And so it's like, yeah, but everyone that came knew we worked with ayahuasca, and that we basically made it really clear we were going to eventually turn this into ayahuasca. And that's what happened. All those people that came come to our other ceremonies. So it was pretty natural. And because ayahuasca is our primary medicine, it's very much in the space, even though it's psilocybin, if that makes sense. There's a different energy because we're like kind of steeped in that, and it translates to these other ceremonies.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I'm curious, is there a what are the reasons that you prefer ayahuasca to psilocybin or other plant medicines?
I mean, for me, it's really that she's just my teacher. Like she's it, you know. I have a much deeper connection, and I just think, they call her kind of like the mother of psychedelics. So it's like Wachuma is like the grandfather, And if you've ever heard like those analogies, the feminine, masculine, which they both have both. I mean, ayahuasca is definitely feminine, but it's still both. And psilocybin to me is like extraterrestrial energy. They're not really male or female. They're fluid, you know? Um, I think, yeah, to me, ayahuasca is more powerful. Like, not that to diminish anything, right? Everything serves its purpose and has its place. For me, ayahuasca, the way that it works, it's so loving and devotional. I have never worked with anything else that feels that way. There's very much the sense of a being there with you. And somehow she knows exactly what you need. Like, she only does what is absolutely best for you. And I don't feel that all medicines work that way. It's just not the same. And again, not that it's wrong. It's like stuff comes up for a reason. That's great. But I feel like ayahuasca is very intentional. And that's the difference. And it's just, yeah, the more feminine, delicate, subtlety space and not so subtle space. Yeah, for me. And, and people can have their own opinion, their own connection. That's fine,
No, I gotcha. I was just curious. Okay. So you mentioned a little bit about not delving into all the medicines because you feel like people can start to be running from themselves or running from something. What, how would you say, how do I want to word that? If someone is trying to decide if they should sit with a plant medicine, whether it's ayahuasca or something else, how would you suggest they determine whether they're ready or if they are just running from something? If they're doing this for the right reasons.
Yeah, I think there's a tonal, just like on how we speak. Like I'm in a few like ayahuasca Facebook groups and people will post in there all the time. And I'm just like, wow, this is like sad. Because people will be like, I want to do the medicine because I need this and blah, 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 all this stuff. And it's just like, you're so desperate. It should not be coming from desperation because she's not going to fix you. And that's like a really heavy load to put on anything. And you're like setting yourself up for disappointment because it's not a one-time situation. You sit one time, great. It's life-changing. It's beautiful. Yeah. You're just beginning. Like there's so much to discover over years of working with the medicine. I like to describe it as there are layers of plant consciousness and not everything is revealed to you all at once. You think it is, right? And it was really beautiful and it blew your freaking mind. Like, yeah. And there's so many more layers to be discovered when you create a relationship with the plant. It's not a showing up with demands and needs and all this stuff. It's humbling saying, you are the master here. I'm a humble student. That's where the magic is. It's not having expectation. Like, we always do sharing before we start and everything. And people are all about like intention. And for me, it's fine people have intention, but I think that we cling to it. And it's like whatever is supposed to happen is going to happen. So it doesn't really matter what your intention is to some extent. I think it's good to be thoughtful about it. Yeah, because you're opening up your psyche. It's a delicate process. And at the same time, I know the medicine knows better than I do. So why am I going to let my human mind think that I know what I need? Because clearly I'm showing up to this master plant for teaching and lessons. So I'm going to let the plant show me what I actually need. And so when I see people being like, I need this, or I've tried everything else, or I'm so suicidal, all this stuff, that's like red flag. No, we don't show up wanting to be fixed. There's actually nothing wrong with you. We're all already whole, and it's just remembering that. And again, it's almost like the constant seeking that something that you think is wrong with you, the psychonaut people and stuff. It's like so subtle, the difference, but there is one on truly being called to something or seeking it out because you've read all this stuff and now it's popular and you think it will fix you and you need it. It's like, no, you don't need it. And I want to drink ayahuasca the rest of my life. So it's kind of like a contradiction to itself, but do you feel like the difference?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get what you mean. I do. I think, I don't know who it was, but I think somebody touched upon that at our retreat about how it's not going to change your life for you. It will help you be able to do so, but it ain't going to do it for you.
Yeah. You have to show up. And that doesn't happen in one time. It will plant the seeds. It'll get it started. But, if you drink medicine for 10 years, your 10-year ceremony is a lot different than your first year ceremony. I'll just say that, because of the trust, the surrender, the continued relationship, saying yes or opening the door even when it's a no inside. It's being like, I trust anyway, even beyond my protective mechanisms. So yeah, it's beautiful. And yeah, it's not a one and done. And I actually I'm not crazy about when people just come one time, because I feel, again, your first experience is so different than the rest because it's all new. So it's like everything is a surprise. Like, yeah, day 2, you're familiar, more familiar, right? But other than that, there's so much more to be discovered when you keep working with it. And that's up to the user's choice. But it's like, yeah, there's just so much after that first time,
Definitely. Definitely. I am looking forward to my second time. No, I'm sure. I'm curious now that you mentioned that. I don't know if you even remember this, but did you notice significant differences between your first ceremony and your second?
Yeah. My first ceremony, so I'm also an interesting case. So we do at least 3 days. And so the first one was a 3-day that I went to. I didn't feel it at all the first day. And I told my teacher. He said, okay. Second day, I was on my 6th cup before I felt it. So he would serve me in between serving publicly. And he said, do you feel it? And I said, yes. And I had 1 tear streaming down my face. At that point, I was just so high that, I cried. That's about it. I was so blocked and resistant. And that happens. He said it his partner actually was the same way. Women sometimes can have a really high tolerance, and that's basically you're filtering it out. So I didn't see visuals for 4 years, which is unheard of. And I was doing, 6 retreats a year, and so that's how much I was filtering out of the experience, even 4 years in. So my second time, I went to Brazil. I sat in November. I went to Brazil in February for a 10-day. And then I played music for the first time. And so he would give me double shots. So it'd be like a big cup, and I would take that at the same time instead of taking 2 individual cups apart from each other. And I still had to drink 5 cups. And then when you're doing a retreat that long, by the end, you're more sensitive, obviously, because you build up a sensitivity, which is what is supposed to happen with time. You don't need as much. I'm happy to say I don't even need a full cup if it's strong medicine now. And I normally, if it's strong, I just 1 cup the whole ceremony. I don't even need more. But so yeah, very different. And that took years of drinking a lot of medicine. And I would purge a lot because I drank so much medicine. And now I haven't purged in a long time. Occasionally it'll sneak up, or I think I'm going to, but I don't. But in the beginning I did a lot.
Wow. Okay. Now I'm curious, is there something like genetics or body-wise that makes certain people, you said females sometimes are more resistant to it, but is there something that some people need less versus some people need more? Is there a way to know?
It's trauma. That's literally it. It's you've shut down and you're not letting anything else in. So when something is trying to take over your mind, you're not allowing it. And so basically you have to gain trust. And so that's ultimately what it is. And again, when I didn't see visuals until 4 years in, and I never thought I would, and now I do all the time. Yeah, it's literally because I was so shut down that, yeah. And actually, I remember before ayahuasca, and my partner reminds me of this sometimes, we had mushroom pills, which I don't even remember. At this point, I drank definitely heavier. Haven't drank in a long time, but he had little capsules of mushrooms, And he remembers me being like, we took them, and I don't feel anything. Like, I literally would not even consider it that I did mushrooms. Like, I literally don't even remember doing them, because to me, there was no impact at all. Like, I would get a little talkative. That's about it. And he's like, no, you feel, but basically my mind is so strong that I basically filtered it out. So anytime I tried stuff when I was younger, I never felt it. I would always have to take a lot, and I would just get talkative. That was the only like symptom I would have, like if I took Adderall or something like that. Even drinking, I used to be able to drink a lot. And so it's the same thing. It's basically, yeah, your protective mechanisms are very strong, and everyone's mechanisms are different depending on our trauma or how we had to adapt to be in life. So yeah, weight is actually like nothing to do with it.
Wow. I had no clue. That makes a lot of sense though. So like the trauma that you are holding on to, you are blocking even the medicine from
Well, yeah, because you're scared that some part of you,
it.
again, it's not conscious. I had no idea. I would be sitting there being like, I'm surrendering. I don't understand. And I would always feel it like much later than everybody else too for a long time. Like I'd be like peaking when ceremony was closing. And so yeah, it's just, again, the medicine will start to pierce the mind and like work its way in. But for some people, it takes a lot longer. And yeah, like fine, if someone is super overweight, they might need a little bit more, just on how fast you're like absorbing it in your bloodstream. But in my experience and seeing other people, it is our protective mechanisms that have the most effect on that.
Wow.
Yeah. So some people are just more receptive, you know? Like,
No, that makes sense. It's also really mind-blowing to me and a little ironic to me because I felt it significantly less the first night than I did the second day, but I did more the first night than I did the second day.
mm. Well,
So,
and also what happens with time is like less is actually more. So it's about finding the sweet spot with time. It's like you don't actually need to have these like experiences where you're out in space. They're beautiful and sometimes, and they're super overstimulating and can be really hard to deal with, right? Especially if every ceremony is like that. So over time you learn like what's your dosing? Where can I be present with the experience happening in my body, instead of like for me, I drink 6 cups, I'm high as a kite, I'm not even in my body anymore. And that happens to a lot of people. It's because there's trauma in my body and I don't want to be here. So I'm leaving, and or I'm really high or whatever. There's some kind of dissociation that starts to happen. So with time, we describe it as like you want to just walk through the door instead of blasting off, then you've landed back in the door. It doesn't have to be that way. There's beauty in both, but my teacher would say, in the end, all you'll need is one drop, because the
mm,
pathway is already open. It's a state of consciousness. The medicine exists without you taking her. So we use the medicine to tune into that frequency of that master teacher plant, but it exists without us. It doesn't just come alive when we drink it. It's always available.
mm, no, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. I was thinking that it could have tied into like I had even slightly more comfort the next day as opposed to the first night. And when you mentioned trauma, like I was scared shitless the first night.
Yeah.
I didn't tell anybody I was going to New Hampshire to do ayahuasca. I just packed up my car. I drove 3 hours by myself in New Hampshire, and I was scared shitless. Like
Yeah.
just because of even the unknown. Like I knew I felt called to do it, but the unknown and the unfamiliarity and the knowing nobody here, the I told nobody what I'm doing, and so like I did have deal with that.
Yeah. And that's the beauty that comes with continuing to drink, is when you get comfortable and safe, so much more can come up. When you know all the people or even a few people, like depending on the circle, it's like there's so much beauty that comes with that. Like it took me a long time to feel safe, to get to like my deep, deep stuff was like 4 to 5 years in, had already been doing like 100 ceremonies at that point. And it took that long for this stuff that I had so much shame around feeling around people or feeling in general to come up. So yeah, there's always more waiting to be discovered. And on the outside circumstantial things that plays into that.
Yep. No, that makes a lot of sense. Wow. Okay. So I'm curious, what suggestions you would have if somebody listening to this has the feeling that they have to do ayahuasca. They've got that desperation. I need to try this right now.
No.
What is your suggestion to them?
I would look at what is underneath that. Yeah. And that, yeah, looking at that desperation, like what's driving the desperation? Because there's actually something under that you're not acknowledging, that you're projecting or looking out this outside source to help you. And we need help, right? But again, if we're coming out of desperation, like, I have a song called Teacher. It says, you're your own teacher. You are. And so why do we constantly look outside ourselves for that? Or like so heavily, like we disempower ourselves all the time. And you asked what one of my lessons was about the medicine. Another one is that basically realizing that you are God. Because there's so much shame collectively that we think we are not, that we are separate or less than. And so we're constantly giving away our power. And it's really hard to actually acknowledge that you are God. And because you've been with so much of that is like owning all of your actions and being accountable and that you're also that powerful and that you've been playing small your whole life. It's very hard to be with. But yeah, I would say to look under that and make sure you've done other things already. Have you gone to somatic therapy or any kind of therapy? Like, I don't know, work with psilocybin or cannabis is an amazing medicine also. I just think there are a lot of other things to try. You don't want to be showing up to that space in that space of desperation. It just doesn't make sense. It's almost like it feels very unstable to me. And, if someone's like suicidal or struggling with depression, like you don't drink medicine. That's not something you do. So it's the same thing. If we're coming from a super ungrounded place, why would we open up a bunch of stuff? You're not even going to be able to process what's revealed to you. And so like in some way needing to show up in a grounded way, being able to receive what we're going to receive and it not completely like, tsunami our life.
No, definitely. So I'm curious. You mentioned in that answer a little bit about woking with cannabis. Have you woked with that in a ceremonial type of way?
Yeah. In the Santo Daime, actually, which is where my teacher's from, they used to work with cannabis and ayahuasca at the same time, actually. But then they stopped because people who didn't have a relationship with it already would get real crazy. And so, yeah, my partner has been working with it for a very long time. So I've learned a lot about it through him. And then he's been growing on and off, now legally, because where we live, he can grow. So that's been cool to be a part of that process. And for me, I think when I first started doing the medicine, I wasn't really smoking a lot of cannabis at that time. And then when I started, I definitely didn't for a while. And then now when I do, I'm very sensitive, so I don't need a lot. But for me, it definitely is an amplifier. I mean, it's a mirror, all medicines are. And I think people need to remember that because we like to blame other stuff for how it makes us feel. And like, it's actually another thing I'm passionate about talking about is people being like, I get anxiety from smoking weed. And I'm like, no, you have anxiety. That's what that is. Cannabis is a mirror for you and you don't want to see. And so then we project it onto the plant and that's not actually real. Or you're smoking way too much, one of the two, but it's like, I realized I had anxiety for the first time, like 4 years ago while I was high. And I remember like I would get tension in my shoulders and everything, like the moment I smoked and I'd be like, oh, why is it making me feel like this? Why did I get high? All this stuff. And then I realized, wait, this is always there. I just don't cannabis is bringing it to the surface. I basically numb out, so I don't feel the tension all the time. And then when I get high, I get to feel all my feelings more amplified. It's like a microscope, you know?
It brought more awareness to it.
Yeah. And just being like, it's like the same thing if you did ayahuasca, right? Whatever's coming up, are we going to be like, are we going to blame the plant or are we going to think it's ourself? Because then why are you there? But for some reason, people think cannabis is different. It's not. But it's also because there was like 50 years of the war on drugs and there's been so little education. You know, it's the number one used because so cannabis is considered a psychedelic. By the way, it has psychoactive properties. If you get high enough, I have taken an edible that I made with homegrown cannabis and I had full on visuals like I was on ayahuasca. And so it's the most used psychedelic plant medicine in the world. And it's the least we know about. Like, no one freaking knows anything about it. They're just getting high, whatever. And some people who are observant and have awareness and have been smoking a long time see the benefit, obviously. And there's people, we call it over medicating, that are getting way too high and they're numbing out. They're not actually using it as the tool that it is to feel our feelings and to gain more awareness. Like Bob Marley, the famous quote, the herb reveals you to yourself. It's literally true, you know, but are you going to get high and go to work and try and look at yourself? Probably not. So it's all about like when you choose to do it. And not every time has to be a lesson per se, right? You can smoke and just have fun and like relax and unwind. And sometimes I'll do like a little cannabis ceremony by myself. I'll smoke, come lay down, meditate, and clean. And then by the end, if I go in and do the work, I'm not even high anymore after an hour because I go in and use it as a ceremony. And then I'm literally not high after that. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And I think it's beautiful medicine that is not respected and has been exploited, unfortunately, so much. And, you know, like cannabis you're smoking at dispensaries sucks. It's literally in sterile environments all the time. Like my partner like plays music for the plants and stuff like that. Like it should be intentional. You're smoking it. You're intaking it into your body. Why should it not be sacred on how you care? And so it's like definitely growing yourself or buying from someone you know is the best way, just because the amount of intention that's going into it also makes it different. And people will say that people that are older and have been smoking before it became legal and all that stuff will say how it's different now. And it's like, you really don't want the stuff at the dispensary. It's been pushed to just make THC, and there's so many other good things in cannabis, all the cannabinoids and that work together in harmony, you know? And what would that do if we just push this plant to create this one thing when it was really meant to be the full spectrum experience?
No, that's very true.
I totally am passionate about it. I got a lot to say about it.
I have lots of comments and questions on all of that. Let's see. So I'm curious on, now, have you done ayahuasca and cannabis together yourself?
No. We have talked about it. Rodney has. And for me, I took a very little amount and I was had smoked a little bit, but I wouldn't say I felt the medicine. I was more just in the space, but I wasn't going through a process necessarily, like as a participant dose.
Mm-hmm.
But Rodney has.
Okay. How was his experience with combining the two?
It's good, and he wants to experiment more with it. You know, it's something we've talked about doing, like close friends and stuff, doing, you know, people that are more experienced with cannabis, because it can be like overpowering, you know. Even like a lot of people have probably taken psilocybin and smoked weed, and people will say that usually like enhances your experience or it can be grounding. So it's the same thing. But yeah, I think if you're not experienced, it might be more difficult. Or even if you're not experienced with ayahuasca, it's like, I really do like working with one medicine. It's not about like doing all this different stuff at once. It's like ayahuasca is powerful enough, you know? But cannabis also can add something to the experience.
No, that's true. That's true. So now I'm curious. You mentioned a few different times in terms of ayahuasca, in terms of cannabis, about running away from things, numbing yourself. Do you have any suggestions or advice for any of the listeners who might find themselves in the situation where they feel like they are running from something in their life or they're trying to numb away the pain. Any tips for them to get past that?
Yeah, a lot of them are hard with words because they're energetic, but I would say there's like a sensation I describe as like leaning back in our awareness. So it's like detaching from your identity in a positive way to have awareness of the situation from the observer perspective instead of like you as the main character. And so in my head, I just like lean back and I try and look from behind me, if that makes sense. Again, it's more just an energetic thing, but that's how it feels. And then you gain more awareness. And the medicine teaches you this. So the medicine teaches you a lot of techniques to use in your life, and this is one of them. It's like looking at the fear instead of being the fear. So you can actually lean back and feel the fear, and you realize that you're not it. And so it's the same thing with the thing that you're avoiding. It's just a part of you. It's not who you are. And so if you look at it and feel it and then let go, and you keep doing that by giving yourselves breaks, but you lean into the feeling, feel it for what it is, and then let go. And then you keep doing that, and eventually the thing goes away. But you have to feel it and feel it and feel it. But again, when we make it a part of who we are, it's harder to actually feel it and let it go. And so when we lean back and realize we are not the pain, it is just a sensation and a feeling. It's all the story we create around it makes it 100 times worse. So trying to just feel the feeling as like a ball of energy, not something that consumes you.
Okay. Wow, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Thanks. I liked that. I liked that. Okay. Um, so I kind of want to switch topics a little bit. We've talked a lot about plant medicine. But I'm curious if you have any tips or suggestions for somebody trying to pursue a passion of theirs or a goal of theirs, and they feel like they're stuck.
Stuck as in maybe it's not happening as soon as they want it to, or
Yeah, either it's not happening as soon as they want it to, or they're not progressing the way they want to, or it's just not going according to plan.
yeah, I would say to just trust. Again, a lot of things are like it's so easy. It's like the tip of our nose, right? But it's hard to actually put the lesson into action. And this is something I struggle with in my own life as a musician. But really just trusting in divine timing, because if it were supposed to be different, it would be, because there are no accidents. Everything is on purpose. So if something is supposed to be for you, it will be for you. And if it's not for you, it won't be. And that those statements are super confronting because some part of us doesn't want it to be that way, right? But we can either choose to accept it as it is and to eliminate our suffering that we have around it, or we can keep torturing ourselves. It's really that simple. So you basically either accept and you trust in life or you don't. And, follow what you love and it will blossom, but everything takes time. If you look at nature, it's like nothing happens overnight. And keep nurturing it, watering those seeds with love and awareness, and your vision will come in time when it's supposed to. But like the greatest things in life you can't see. And it's like, if we knew how it was going to come out, what's the fun in that? And a lot of like the most beautiful gifts in my life, I would have never even known would have been possible, right? It wasn't even something in my awareness or imagination. And that's really like the universe at work. And so it's like, keep holding the vision and pursuing what you love. At the same time, how it unfolds is probably going to be a surprise, because that's just how life works when you're co-creating with life instead of not accepting it, right? And thinking that you know better, because you don't. You can only see right here. And you're not like leaning back and seeing the bigger picture. You don't know what's in store yet. So again, easier said than done, but
No, but that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So we didn't touch a lot on this, but you mentioned a little bit about you being a musician. Can you delve into a little bit about how you got involved with that?
yeah. I had been surrounded by music when I was younger. Like I mentioned earlier, my mom is a musician, and my grandpa, which is her dad, they used to sing folk songs and stuff growing up, and he never lived where we lived, so it definitely wasn't all the time. But when he came and visited, they would sing together. And my mom was in like a couple bands growing up. I don't remember a ton about it. So music was kind of always around. And then from a really young age, I wanted to be a singer. That's what I like would write on my little things. They say, "What do you want to be?" And I had like karaoke machines and stuff, and I would like sing for my mom's friends when they came over. And then in high school, I was in choir like on and off. And then in high school, I learned how to play guitar. There was like a guitar class at school. And yeah, then after that, like I played on and off, but it wasn't really until I found the medicine that like all that bloomed for me. I hadn't written a song until I did the medicine. That was like a block for me my whole life. Like even as a child, I remember thinking like, if I want to be a musician, I'll have to cover songs. And I remember like singing like Pink songs or something. And yeah, so I knew that as a kid. I definitely identified as not being a writer. And like English was my worst subject. Like I didn't like reading. Now all that's different. I'm a writer and I love reading. But yeah, it wasn't until I found the medicine she opened that up for me. So I had a block around that, around like, my voice, speaking my truth, creative expression, being seen, all that stuff. Yeah, and then that really like really, really fast I grew musically. And then yeah, now I play many other instruments and stuff. But piano was my first instrument as a really young child, and then mostly guitar.
Wow, okay. So you said you wrote your first song after doing the medicine. What?
Yeah, I had written one because I was in a songwriting class. It's called Girl Guitar in Austin, Texas, where I'm from. And so you like had to write a song, you performed it or whatever. So yeah, I wrote that one song, which I don't even remember. It definitely wasn't like amazing. And then my first song was after the ceremony. It's called Heart Like the Ocean. I'm actually re-recording it right now for a live album. It was on my very first like album that's not even on Spotify anymore because it's like I've changed so much that it's hard to like listen to. But it's a great song. Yeah.
Wow. So I'm curious, how long about after doing the medicine for the first time did you get much more musically involved and create the song and all that?
It was definitely within the month. So we call it receiving song. So I don't write them, they come to me, and then they come in full form pretty much every time. So it's like in the Santa Daime, they call them hymns, and they receive the song from beyond. And so that's what happens. And so normally the melody comes, I'll just sing it right then, and then I stick with that melody that comes through right when I sing it. Sometimes I might have chords I'm working on or something and they happen to match. But then then the ceremony right after that I started playing. At that time I only had like 3 songs. So normally for me, right after I do medicine, for a long time, it's changed in the past couple years, but for a long time, like as a participant, I would sit and I'd have like 3 songs come to me like within that month. So it's like it opens it and then I receive the song, and then now it's more sporadic. It's just like driving or something inspires me and I feel the song coming, and then I like grab my phone.
Mm. Okay. Wow, that's so cool though. It was pretty fast too. Like you said, a month or so, then wow.
Yeah, it was definitely within the first month. Like I definitely have the journal still like from that time. And I have like a songbook, and they're pretty much almost in chronological order, but I put it from like speed and stuff too. But so I know that was the first song, and I was actually working on this album, and I was like, oh, it'd be cool to put them in chronological order. But I'm like, some of them came so close to each other, I don't know how to do it. It's like I would really have to go and look at the exact date that was received. Yeah.
Okay. So now, will all of the songs that you recorded been received? None you came up with or wrote on your own?
No, I don't ever go to my journal saying I'm going to write a song. That's not what happens. It's sometimes I'll have an inkling to pull my journal out and it's been like months and then boom, a song will come. And it's like, that's like why I was supposed to go grab the journal, is because the song was going to come. Sometimes, like on the last album, Life Passes By, I meddled with the words a little bit because I wanted to like make it more creative and more profound with the word choices. But it also didn't take me long. Like it was like the same day. And so I was just kind of looking at the word choices and being like, how could I like color it more? But I didn't change the foundation.
Okay.
There was just more analytical thought going into it. Normally I don't change anything. Maybe a word, you know, where I'm like, oh, that word was just kind of messy as it came through. This word is similar, but is better.
Okay. Wow, that's so cool. Okay. So now I have one more question for you. Now, I wanted to kind of approach the podcast by getting a question from somebody that wasn't me, an outsider, to kind of just ask all the guests something she might want to know from a random person. So I asked my best friend to come up with a question, and her question was, what is the best decision you've made in your life thus far, in your opinion, and why?
It's to do the medicine. Yeah,
Okay.
it just changed my whole life. It was the door for every decision after that. So that was it. And the decision that's not that, that was after I'd been doing the medicine for a couple years, was to pursue music. Because I wasn't, you know.
Okay. Wow, that's great. Thank you. So I lied. I do have like one more question.
Okay.
So what would you, so if someone is thinking they want to sit with ayahuasca or with a plant medicine, what would you say to them before, if they're on the fence or if they're unsure, like what would you say to them to determine if now is the time or if now isn't the time for them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say listen to their own intuition, you know. Is it fear? Because this definitely comes up for people sometimes. Like, is it fear that's holding you back? Or is it really not the right time? For me, I think it's mostly fear. There is no right time, right? Like, okay, if you just like had someone say you're an adult and your son died, okay, you should probably wait for a little while. You know what I mean? We don't want to like delve into that. You need to like deal with the wound on your own first before you just come to something like that. But, and I always say, like, I've never met anyone that's ever regretted it, ever. So, I think it's mostly fear. And sometimes it might not be the right time yet. And it could also be because that, yeah, you're afraid. Is that, are you really going to show up? Are you going to commit like like you want to, you know? Like I have plenty of people that I know that like are interested, but haven't because they're like not mature enough, you know? There's a certain emotional maturity to be able to, again, unpack what you've been shown. So it's like, if you're given all these tools but don't use them, then what's the point of doing it?
That's true.
You have to be ready for change, you know? And we're not ever going to be ready. So it's like a paradox, you know? But
no, that's so true. That's so true. But you've got to be looking for it a little bit and going into it, in my eyes, with the right intention. Because even there's been different people that I have told that I experienced it, and a few people's reactions were even like, "I bet you got a great trip." Like I didn't do it for the trip.
Yeah.
Like I didn't visualize nothing. Like, oh, I'd have people say to me, "What'd you see?" Like, I
Yeah.
didn't do ayahuasca for what I would see.
But see, you can tell those people aren't ready because they're still associating like that. And that's when I talk to people like that, I'm like, oh, and I usually stop talking because I'm like, oh, that's not what I'm trying to engage in. And that's not what this is. But obviously, you don't know and you're not even aware of that it could be something different. So it's like that person's not ready, you know?
Yep.
Because if you're looking for a trip, I'm like, don't even use that word. Don't even use that word. It's weird. It's not a
No,
trip. It's very real, you know?
no, no, I completely agree. Even Chris and I were talking about it, and he made the comment that a trip sounds like something fun. Like, I didn't hate ayahuasca, but I didn't have fun.
Yeah.
I sat with like all of the worst experiences of my life coming through my mind in one weekend. I was not having fun. Like, we
Yeah.
weren't celebrating. Like,
Totally. There's joy after,
yes, but
but you
like,
have to go through some shit to get there.
yes, it was not like this is a party. No.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay. Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Now, no pressure whatsoever, but I do like to just ask this in case. Is there anything I haven't asked or anything that you want to share and tell the listeners before we sign off?
Yeah, if you want to listen to my music, it's on all streaming platforms under Haley Harkin. Call it folk medicine music. If you like this topic, you'll probably like it. I think that's it.
Yes, and I will link your information in the show notes and where they can find Spotify and all of the other platforms. And I will say, home music, even if you are not called to plant medicine, is amazing. It is super calming, super peaceful. Love it. Absolutely love it. So, of course, and thank you so much for being on Manda's Mindset. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And thank you all for listening to another episode of Manda's Mindset. As always, if you enjoyed the show, if you would like, subscribe, follow, share it with your friends, share it with your grandma, share it with your mom. Help me get the name out there and get more listeners to hear what I'm trying to share. Thanks for listening, and until next time, guys.